Welcome back to Dimitra's Dishes. So today I'm going to teach you how to make one of my favorite dishes, which is bread. And not just any bread, it's going to be a whole wheat Tiropsomo. And Tiropsomo just means cheese bread. And we're using Feta cheese because that's how it's traditionally made. Use your favorite cheese. Whatever cheese you like, use that. But at least try making it with Feta cheese once. So it's going to be sort of a longer video, so let me go over the ingredients really quick. They're really just a few and basic ones. For the dough, I have some lukewarm water and some dry yeast over here that I'm going to let sit just for a couple of minutes so it can soften up just a bit. We don't need to let it bloom or anything like that. I just have it ready. We have some whole wheat flour, a little bit of salt. Make sure you use really high quality whole wheat flour. I love getting stone ground, organic if possible. It's better than, the regular variety. Then you need some bread flour, some white unbleached bread flour. I already talked about the yeast, and that's going to make our dough. That's it. And then for everything else that's going to go in the bread, you need a little bit of sesame seeds. You can leave them out if you like, but it's up to you. Rosemary, dried oregano, a little bit of semolina flour, and that's just going to go on the bottom. If you don't have semolina flour, go ahead and use corn flour. That's fine. Try to make it GMO-free or organic and all that good stuff. And then some really good quality Feta cheese. My favorite of all is the sheep's milk Feta. The Donis, use your favorite. And that's it. So I'm going to begin by making the dough. And I'm going to make a no-knead dough, which means that there's no need to knead it. You're not going to knead it. It's just really done in such a short amount of time. And the method comes from this book right here, which I highly recommend that you guys go out and buy or order. The New Artisan Bread in 5 Minutes a Day. It's by Jeff Hertzberg and Zoe Francois. These people are genius. This book is wonderful. It's really worth having. And just get it. It's great. So I'm going to put my flours in here with the salt. Just mix it all up. And then I'm going to add my yeast and my water. And I'm just going to mix it all up until it comes together. We're not going to knead this, remember. It's just going to mix up. It's going to be a pretty wet dough until everything comes together. And that's really it. You can do this with a spatula if you like. Now, as you're going, if you needed to add a little more water, go ahead. That's it. My dough is all ready. It's all completely incorporated. It's a little bit sticky. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cover this loosely with its lid or with a plastic wrap and leave it on the side for 2 hours until it rises and doubles in size. So after about 2 hours, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to have air bubbles. It's going to be really nice, and it's going to have risen, and it's going to have doubled in size and all that. So make sure that the bucket or pot, whatever you're using, is big enough to hold all of this dough. It should be about a 6-quart container. So once you let it sit on the side for about 2 hours, you punch it down, and then you cover it with a lid, and you want to let this sit in your refrigerator overnight before you make this recipe or any other bread recipe. Let it sit overnight for at least overnight. It's going to develop a better flavor, and then it'll be ready to use in the morning. So I have a dough that's all ready to use. Okay, so we're going to start by putting some bench flour, which means some flour on our whatever work surface you're working on, if it's a workbench, if it's a counter, whatever you have. Now the dough has sat in the refrigerator overnight, at least one night. This can stay in the refrigerator for a good week, and it'll develop more and more flavor as you go. It'll get more of like a sourdough taste, which is really delicious in bread. And you want to do that. You want to make sure you do that. You leave it in the fridge and you don't rush and make it, because bread is delicious, it's hearty, it's comforting, and you just want to make it right. It's something that just takes time. And remember what we say, all good things come to those who wait. So when you're making bread, you have to have some patience, right? So you're going to roll it out like this into one big ball. Not roll it out, you're going to form one big bowl. And then we're going to cut this into 3 pieces as equal as we can. And this makes a pretty big batch. We're a family of 6 and 1 on the way, so we eat more bread than maybe other people. But honestly, even if we were just a family of 2, I can eat 1 whole loaf all by myself. It's that good. So if you don't want to make the whole batch at once, just go ahead and refrigerate the rest and just, make whatever amount you want. Each one of these balls of dough will make 3 spirals of the cheese bread, the feta cheese bread. And the best thing about it, I'm going to show you later on, is that you can make this bread and freeze it so that you could have it for the day that you don't have time to bake, to do this whole process, and it'll just be ready. So now each one of these balls of dough we're going to cut into 3 pieces. So you're going to have 9 pieces total for 9 little loaves of feta bread. I'm going to get some more flour and form my little dough balls, and then I'll show you what they look like. All right, so I formed my 9 equal dough balls, and once you work with dough, it's going to be hard to kind of stretch it out. I'm going to leave it on the side in my parchment paper lined baking pan, and I'm going to let them rest just for a little while, maybe for like 15-20 minutes. You could even let these rest up to an hour, and then they'll come to room temperature, and the closer to room temperature they are, the easier they're going to be to stretch out and roll out, because they'll just have rested and they'll be soft and not cold, and they won't kind of come back together once you roll them out. Otherwise, if you try to do this while they're cold, you're going to be rolling, and they're going to be coming back together and not keeping its shape. So I'm going to let this sit for at least 15 minutes covered. While my dough is resting, I'm going to chop up my fresh rosemary, and this fresh rosemary is going to add just a burst of freshness to this delicious bread. If you don't like rosemary, if you're not a huge fan, just go right ahead and use your favorite herbs. If that's dill or just the oregano that we're using here, whatever you want. You're making it for your family, so make it the way you all like to eat it. Just going to chop this all up. So I'm just going to bunch it all together and just chop it up. I'm going to keep it as fine as possible, but not too fine. All right, so my rosemary is all chopped up. I'm going to put this in my little bowl right here. Smells absolutely wonderful. And now the best part, we're going to make our feta cheese spirals. I'm going to show you how to do that. All right, so I have some dough that I've already made from before that I let rest for quite some time. The longer you let it rest, it's going to start to kind of like get fluffier and double up in volume again. That's fine. Mine has been resting for about an hour because I had so much stuff to run around and do. The longer you let it rest, the bigger and kind of fluffier it's going to get, but it's going to be easier to work with. But if you don't have an hour, 10-15 minutes will be good enough. Now, we're going to put just a little bit of flour on our counter. And we're going to take 1 piece at a time, kind of put it on here. That's a lot of flour. I should have put less flour. But anyway, you don't want to put that much flour because then it'll be hard to kind of stay together. So I'm just going to stretch this out. See, when it has sat at room temperature, it's going to be so easy to stretch. You don't even need a rolling pin. You could pretty much do this with your fingers. And you want to stretch this out to about 12 inches long. If you can get it a little longer, that's fine. 12 to 13 inches is just ideal. You want to take some oregano, dried oregano, and sprinkle it on the dough first. Then you want to take some of your feta cheese and just along the center, put as much as you like. Now, you could also add chopped olives to this. You can definitely put sun-dried tomatoes. Whatever your favorite filling is, go ahead and put it in here. I like it just like this, honestly. This is my favorite way to make this. Now, you want to take it and fold it over. And if it starts to rip up on you, that is completely fine. We're going to roll it up again. And it'll cover every little imperfection up. So now you want to take some of your chopped up rosemary and sprinkle it on top. And then we're going to roll it. Roll it like you would a cinnamon roll. Just like that. And I'm going to put it on the side. Let me show you one more. So I'm not going to put any more flour this time. This looks like enough. I don't want there to be too much flour on here. I'm going to stretch this out. Again, the colder the dough is, the trickier it is to stretch out. So when your dough is cold, you're going to have to use a rolling pin. But since mine sat out for quite some time, my fingers are doing the job perfectly. Sprinkle some oregano. And then I'm going to do a line of feta cheese. Crumble it all up. Fold it over. And pinch it all together. Put the rosemary, and now we're going to roll it up. And press it down to flatten it. I'm going to continue making the rest of these, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so I've made my feta bread spirals. They're ready, just like this. There's 6 here. There's 3 that I already made before, so that way things can go faster. It's the magic of YouTube. So there are 6 right here. I'm going to put 3 of these on my parchment paper lined baking pan, and I'm going to place a little bit of semolina flour where underneath where these are going to lay on. And for 3 of these, I'm going to dust off the excess flour. I'll even sprinkle a tiny bit more rosemary on these. Now I'm going to cover these with a kitchen towel, and I'm going to set these aside in the warmest place of my house for about an hour and a half. That all depends on the temperature, the season, and all that good stuff. So the colder it is, the longer it's going to take for them to rise. These are going to rise and almost double in size. Whole wheat flour doesn't really double in size as fast as white flour, and that's another thing. You could totally make this with all white flour if you want, but just the whole wheat recipe is so much heartier and tastier in my opinion, and it's actually healthier. So give it a try. I'm going to cover this and let them sit on the side for about an hour until they rise. And in that time, okay, so let me talk about that a little bit. So while these are rising, you want to make sure you set your oven's temperature to 500 degrees. If you have a pizza stone, place the pizza stone in there in the middle rack or the top rack, and then place a cast iron skillet underneath on the bottom, on the floor of your oven, or wherever you can place it on the bottom rack. And that's going to be the perfect way to get the crust on this. It's going to get a nice, beautiful crust once you put these in, once they've risen. We're going to pour water, and I'm going to show you that later. I'm also going to show you what it looks like in the oven in a little bit. But I'm going to place this on the side. You want to make sure your oven is really, really nice and hot while these are rising on the side. So what am I going to do with these? Well, I can also bake these, but since we're not going to eat that much bread today, the best thing about this recipe is before you proof these, which means set them to rise, you can freeze them for a later use. Put them in a freezer bag. This is about a gallon-sized bag. You could put these in here, zip up the bag, and leave these in your freezer for until you need them. So when you're going to be ready to use these, defrost these in your refrigerator overnight, and then do the same thing. Place them on a tray, lined with parchment paper, and put a little bit of semolina or corn flour underneath them. Cover them with a towel and let them rise for about an hour or an hour and a half, depending on how long it takes. And voila, just like that, you have the most delicious homemade bread. I'm going to pop these in my freezer. All right, so my bread has been proofing for about an hour. And this is what it looks like once it has risen, just like this. Now what we're going to do is brush the top with a little bit of water. And this is going to help it get that beautiful crust that good bakery bread gets. And then we're going to put some sesame seeds. If you don't love sesame seeds, you don't have to sprinkle sesame seeds on top of this. It's totally up to you. You can just put some herbs or just leave it just like that the way it is. And then I'll also put a little bit of rosemary. Okay, so remember, I have my oven preheated at 500 degrees. This is going to go in the oven, and I'm going to show you that I'm going to pour this glass of cold ice water in my cast iron pan, and that's going to create this steam. And that steam is going to really make that beautiful crusty exterior of the bread that everybody just loves, and it's going to help it bake beautifully. You won't believe how delicious this bread is going to be once it comes out, but please try not to skip that step. If you don't have a cast iron pan, try to use any kind of metal pan that you have, but cast iron is really the best. Now once I do that, I'm going to close my oven door, and I'm going to reduce the temperature to 450 degrees and let this cook for 30 to 35 minutes. And then if you do have a pizza stone, take the breads out and let them bake on the pizza stone for an additional 5 minutes, and that's going to give them that nice crusty bottom as well. Let me take you to my oven and show you how we're going to do this. Okay, so my feta breads have come out of the oven. They baked at 450 degrees for about 35 minutes. Then I took them off of the, what is it called? The baking sheet, and I put them on my pizza stone so they can bake 5 minutes more on there. That way they could get a nice, more crustier texture. And if you have a pizza stone, if you don't have a pizza stone, make sure to get one because it's completely worth it. Especially once you start baking bread and pizza, it just makes all the difference. And so once they're ready, when you knock on the bottom, they make, it has like a hollow sound. This is what they look like, complete perfection. And when they come out of the oven, set them on like something like to cool, a cooling rack for about 15, 20 minutes. These are best served at room temperature. If you have any leftovers, I don't know how you can have leftovers, cheese and bread. Seriously, nothing is more delicious. But if you do have any leftovers, put them in an airtight bag or an airtight container, refrigerate them, and before serving them the next day, warm them a little bit in the oven. Let me cut into this. Let me cut into the bigger one, and let me show you what it looks like. Let me go halfway. Best to cut a knife with bread with a serrated knife, you guys. Look at that. Tell me that's not beautiful right there. So yummy. This is perfect sandwich bread. It's perfect dipping bread. It's just perfect eating bread, so make sure you make it. I have all of the written out instructions with details on my website, www.dimitrasdishes.com. Like I said, you can make this with white bread, you know, if you really want to do that, but it's hearty and delicious. I suggest that you make it just the way it is. Post your comments down below. If you want to learn how to make a plain whole wheat bread, I can teach you how to do that too. There's whole wheat pizza coming up very soon. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, so that way you don't miss any delicious recipes. I'll see you guys next time. Bye everyone. Have a bite of that. Perfection.